Hi, this is Mike Malidi, Wine Guardian Division Manager. Today we're going to talk about some of the options available on our wine cellar cooling units. First off is our heater option. The heater option consists of an electric heating coil that gets mounted between the cooling coil and the recirc fan in this area here. So this is a factory installed option that must be installed in the factory. It consists of the heater coil, some controls, and depending on the size of the unit, it can be either a 500 watt for our through the walls, a 1 kilowatt or 1,000 watt for our D025 and D050 models, or the SSO25, SSO50 models, and then a 2 kilowatt when we get into the 088 models, both the D088 and the D200. Okay, so what does the heater option do? The heater option acts to heat the air back up that's in the wine cellar. If you think about your heating system at home, when it's cold outdoors, it gets cold in your house, and the heating system comes on and heats that air back up so that you're comfortable and so that your house heats back up to temperature. The same thing happens in a wine cellar. If it gets too cold, naturally gets too cold in your wine cellar, the heating system turns on, warms that air back up in order to keep your wine cellar at 55 degrees, 58 degrees, your set point. Okay, so that's how it works. Air comes in from the wine cellar, gets heated up, and then exhausts back out into your wine cellar. Where it's required is any application where you feel that you've got 2, 3 walls that are exterior exposed walls to the outdoors. Maybe you have a wine cellar that is a complete separate structure from your house that has both the roof structure, all 4 walls as an outdoor exposure. Especially in cold climates, that's a must for a heater application. So it's that type of scenario that you have to think of when you're considering a heater option for the Wine Guardian systems. Low ambient option as part of the Wine Guardian cooling systems consists of a crankcase heater that typically gets mounted underneath the compressor, and also a fan cycling switch that controls the condenser fan operation. The crankcase heater keeps the compressor warm in very cold environments. When we're bringing in air from outdoors or a cold area, that compressor we want to keep at a very warm temperature to keep the oils fluid and so they continue to lubricate the compressor device. The fan cycling switch acts to control the fan. This fan may not need to come on all the time to keep the refrigerant pressures where they need to be. Okay, the way that it works is if you have this mounted in a cold environment, air goes across the condensing coil through the fan and then maybe exhausted out into the space or exhausted out of the system. When these temperature of this air coming in is cold, we want to protect that compressor and protect the refrigeration system from damage. Okay, cold temperatures can damage the compressor without a low ambient kit on it. The oils, if they get too gummy, less viscous, they will not lubricate the compressor and you could have problems. All right, so it's something to really consider when you're applying one of these units. So where is it used? You have to look at where you're going to physically mount the cooling unit. Okay, if it's in a crawl space or if it's in a mechanical room that is very small and you can't vent it correctly, and you have to bring in air from outside, you have to consider the temperatures year-round of that air. If this air is going to be below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, then you want to make sure that this system has low ambient protection on it. Okay, that's a factory installed option. It has to be installed at the factory because of the two devices that I mentioned earlier. All right. So when you're applying our self-contained unit, be considerate of where it's being mounted, how it's going to breathe essentially on the condenser end, and if you need to bring in air from outside. If you need to bring in air from outside, understand the maximum and minimum conditions of that air, and you will have to look at a low ambient protection if they're below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Another option that we have that has to do with the ambient conditions that the unit is mounted is a high ambient version. The high ambient version consists of a larger condenser coil and a larger fan, and that is also a factory option. It's available on our D025 and D050 only. And what it does is it allows the temperature of air coming into the condenser, the air coming into the condenser side, to be a maximum of 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay? Again, how this works is you have to consider the mounting area of this device. If you're in a smaller mechanical room where you need to bring in air to this unit in order for it to breathe, you have to consider the temperature of that air. If you're in an area that has a very warm climate in the summer conditions and you're bringing in outdoor air, you may want to consider the high ambient version because it will take 120 degrees Fahrenheit and still continue to operate, still continue to cool your wine cellar. All right, so again, you have to consider where you're mounting the unit and how it's going to breathe and the temperature of that air that this unit will see. Okay, a factory installed option, and it just automatically works. It's a larger fan, larger condenser coil, and it allows it to accommodate that higher temperature. The serving temperature option is another option that we have with all of our wine cellar cooling units. What the serving temperature option does is it broadens the range of control for the unit. So you'll go from a maximum of say 65 degrees Fahrenheit, be able to control the space to a warmer temperature, down to a low of about 42 degrees Fahrenheit, and controlled down to that low temperature. So for white wines, maybe in a small cabinet or a small wine room, you can control the temperatures down to those lower conditions. So for a serving application in a restaurant or something like that, you may have one cabinet set to 42 degrees, you may have another set to 55 or 57, and then maybe another cabinet or room set to the low 60s. So that gives you a range of serving conditions that you can set the units up to do. So how it works is there is a sensor that's mounted on the coil face in itself, and then it's wired back to our control panel. What that sensor does is it monitors the temperature of the cooling coil. So if it gets too cold, it forces the system to stay off. Our controller allows for the setup of that function, but basically what it does is it has an initial set point of 35 degrees. So if that sensor sees the temperature at 35 degrees, it will continue to keep the system off until it raises above 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Once it gets above 40 degrees Fahrenheit, the system turns back on and begins to cool again. So what that does is it prevents the coil from freezing up, a defrost control of the system. That allows us to create that operating range to the low 40s up to the high 60s. Obviously the freezing coil doesn't happen at the higher temperatures, but it does broaden that range of performance. What you need to be concerned with when you're applying this option is to make sure that you have enough capacity with the system to get as cold as 42 to 45 degrees for the space. So when you're running your heat load calculation, you want to put your actual temperature that you want to control, let's call it 42 degrees, in your heat load calculator to see what type of or what size system that is required. Your BTUs per hour, your capacity is going to change. It's going to increase as you do that. So be concerned about that and really pay attention to that detail. If you want to maintain those colder temperatures, you really have to understand the BTU per hour requirements. Another part of that package is the controls in itself are settable. So in the field, if you found that you needed to make some adjustments, a technician could go into our controllers and adjust those settings if need be to control the space. The water-cooled option that we have available on our wine cellar cooling units is available on the ducted system, both vertical and horizontal only. We do not currently have available a water-cooled version of our splits. But what the water-cooled version does is it essentially removes the fan and air-cooled condenser portion of the unit. And in its place, we put a water-cooled condenser. So the water-cooled condenser, it's mounted right in this area, and the result will be an in and out piping connection as part of the unit. So how does that work? Water from the mounting area or the facility gets piped to the unit, and that water acts to cool the refrigerant down in the system. Whereas in an air-cooled device, the air is cooling down the refrigerant. A water-cooled, the water cools down the refrigerant. Okay? It's important to understand the amount of water being used in this application. It's not a good idea to apply a water-cooled unit to an area where you're on city water or well water. It can use a significant amount of water, and it can be expensive and a waste of energy to just take that water and dump it down the drain. They're ideal for applications where you have a cooling tower, maybe a high-rise apartment building, or if you have a home that has a geothermal system. Tying into a geothermal system is ideal application for a water-cooled device. They have the same performance characteristics of the air-cooled as far as capacities, and the water temperature range should be anywhere from a low of 45 degrees Fahrenheit up to a high of 85 degrees Fahrenheit. And the water usage really depends on the size of the unit. Like I said, they can be applied to our 025 all the way up to our 200 series, and they work very well with geothermal or cooling tower applications. So it's when you're looking at different possibilities for applications, the water cooled is a great feature. It does not need any venting also as part of the application. So if you have a water cooled unit, you do not have to bring any air to the compressor condenser section. So it works very well if you have water available and limited space, limited venting space. It may be the way to go. One of the other options that WineGuardian has are auxiliary duct collars and ductwork. If for some reason in your application you think you have to vent the condenser side or you need additional duct collars for the evaporator side, We sell these as optional pieces of equipment that can be ordered through our portal. If you need additional duct collars, like I said, for the evaporator side to the wine cellar, or if you plan on venting the condenser side, you can purchase these, either just the duct collars themselves, or we have a couple different kits with the flexible ductwork. These range in size from 8-inch round up to 12-inch for our larger units. So these are available. In addition to the duct collars, we do have grills, and these grills are matched to the different sizes of units that we have, the 025 through the 200. You can purchase these grills also. So these grills can be one applied to the unit, or you can take these grills and mount them in the space. They are paintable, so they could be painted to match the decor of the room. So they are available, and they're designed to match the airflow of the unit. That's one of the nice things. So you don't have to guess or try to figure out the size requirements based on the airflow of the system. You can just use one of these to mount it in the space. So these are available also for purchase through our website, through our portal, and so just be aware of that. Both supply and return grills and duct collars and flexible duct.